I asked people from around the world who fled dictatorships controversial questions. People have called Trump a fascist. What do you think about that?
They dilute the meaning of words. Being a fascist, like what does that mean?
He doesn't believe that laws apply to him. Those are the essential markings of what a fascist is.
Do you think socialism could ever work?
Absolutely not.
No, I don't think it would work. It's just against human nature.
And I think those people who defend socialism, they do without having any understanding of what it means to live under those regimes.
There's been a lot of talk recently, whether during elections or on college campuses, around democracy, fascism, and communism. But what the hell do these words even mean anymore? If everyone is a threat to democracy and a fascist dictator, what are we even saying, bro? So I confronted 4 influential people, from exiled political leaders, world-class plastic surgeon, a human rights activist, and even a current US Congresswoman. But before I put them on the spot, let's hear about their story.
I escaped from North Korea when I was 13 years old. I went through many journeys through China to Mongolia, then South Korea, and came to America. Now I'm currently working as a human rights advocate. I was born in North Korea, and when I was born there, I had no idea about the world because North Korea government controls all the information that North Korean people can receive. And growing up at home, the first thing I remember being taught by my mom was not to whisper. She said the most dangerous thing that I had in my body was my tongue. If I said one wrong word that was not sanctioned by the government, it was going to kill up to 8 generations of my family from my father and my mother's side. So believe that I lived in the socialist paradise, that I had nothing to envy, but the reality was we were starving. Basically, when I was 13, I couldn't find any more insects or plants to eat, and that made me to escape to China with my mother initially.
So I am Dr. Sheila Nazarian. I am a board certified plastic surgeon now practicing in Beverly Hills. And I escaped with my mom and my sister from Iran through the desert into Pakistan and then eventually to the US. The Iranian Revolution was in 1979, which was the year that I was born. Shortly after the Iranian Revolution, where the Shah fell and the Islamic clerics kind of took over, the Iran-Iraq War started 1980 to 1985, and there was bombs flying in, sirens would go off. In 1985, my father said he was going on a medical mission, got permission from the government to go to Vienna, and left me, my mother, and my sister's passports with the government so that, this wasn't an escape attempt. One day, my mom took me and my sister to the bazaar. We were put in the back of a covered truck, and then in that manner made our way into the desert to cross the border into Pakistan. We spent one night in the desert. The border police saw us and they began to shoot. So we all got in the back of the truck and sort of at that point turned the headlights on because we knew that we'd been seen, and the smugglers were able to evade the border police, and we made it into Pakistan. And after 3 months, we were finally able to get visas and reunite with my father in Vienna.
Wow, that's a crazy story. Holy crap.
Venezuelan opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez was imprisoned last year for his role in violent anti-government protests that left more than 40 people dead.
Spent 7 years of imprisonment in total. So I spent the first 4 years in solitary confinement in a military prison. Then I was sent to house arrest. From house arrest, I called for protest again. I was sent back to military prison, then back to house arrest. And I escaped with the help of my custody and other military members, with police and military members. And it was in the context of a legitimate, popular military uprising against the dictatorship of Nicolás Maduro. Things didn't go that way, the way we wanted that day. And that took me to Spanish embassy, where I stayed the next year and a half. And at the end of 2020, I escaped the embassy and Venezuela.
I'm Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. I represent Minnesota's 5th Congressional District.
Can you tell me about your experience of how you escaped dictatorship and Somalia?
When I was 8, the country decided to kick out the dictatorship of Siad Barre, but it didn't just do that. They ended up having a civil war. So different militia groups run by warlords started fighting each other. And for me, it was like going from happy childhood, normal childhood, to one day just waking up, kids like my age carrying guns in the streets and not being able to go to the grocery store anymore, not being able to go to school anymore. The day before we left that night, we had militias that tried to break into our house. And so we ended up being displaced within the country for a little bit, and then eventually found ourselves in neighboring country, Kenya, where I became a refugee there for 4 years. And when I was 12 years old, we got the opportunity to come to the United States, and that's how I got here in 1995.
So before we get into the more controversial questions, I'll tell you now what I think, because it might change by the end. I feel like the more I leave, the more I learn about the US. We like to think that other countries are weird with their smelly food and weird people, but I think more so we're the weird ones, because I don't think many of us know how good we have it. Because yeah, say all you want about the American dream dying, but trust me, people are still seeing this place as the land of opportunity. And it's true, but we're also becoming a country where our citizens are becoming more divided, dumber, and done with our systems, where an alleged murderer today is probably our biggest hero.
On social media, sympathy is pouring in for the shooter. He's become a sort of a hero.
So I'll address by the end how that's even linked to this topic of political refugees and dictatorships, because as each of these people say, things change a lot quicker than you think. And it got me thinking, because is the USA really any different from any of these other countries, or does it just hide it a lot better behind an illusion of choice? Bro, I feel like I'm gonna be on an FBI list after this video. But then again, I don't think I'm alone. More and more people are waking up, and this video is gonna show exactly why you shouldn't just blindly trust any government. But then again, if I'm gonna speak out, I think it's important that I at least spit facts, and it's why I use my sponsor, Straight Arrow News. The Straight Arrow News is a free app and website that highlights not only left and right-leaning opinions, but most importantly gives me an unbiased view on stories from both sides. And again, what am I gonna do if I end up on a list? It's not much I can do, but at least I can back it up with facts, and it's exactly why I use these guys for research and even my newsletter. So a big priority of mine in 2025 is to only work with sponsors that I align with. So if you download their free Straight Arrow News app, you're not gonna just support me, you're also supporting a group of journalists that are committed to truth. So go to san.com/gen or my link in the description to download the free app to stay fully informed. But anyways, with the recent election just behind us, and one of the most anticipated ones at that, I wanted to ask these guys to see if it reminds them of what they saw in their own countries before everything changed. How did everything change after the Islamic Revolution happened?
I remember there was like campus protests, very similar to what's happening in America. But the first thing they did was kill the students. The same students that were protesting on campus in order to overthrow the Shah. Like, oh, why is the Shah living in a castle while there's homeless people on the streets? We want equity. I mean, literally the same stuff again. Like literally the same flowery words, inclusion, equity, all of that, same words. And the students were the first people they killed. And then they went after kind of the Shah loyalists. That included people of all religions. It's really interesting to see that the smartest, most educated, allegedly, are the ones that are so easily tricked. It's kind of a mindfuck,
You've before called Western universities brainwashing centers. I agree. But I'm curious, what was the most shocking thing that you encountered at Columbia?
I think literally my classmates were, wearing this fancy Lululemon yoga pants. This yoga pants cost like $100, They drink this green juice detox to burn their fat. And these elite rich kids are telling me, literally in tears, that they are oppressed. I was so shocked because, if you know you're oppressed, you're not oppressed. Now, knowing is a true definition of oppression. Like in North Korean people, nobody knows that they're oppressed because they are actually oppressed.
It seems like in prior statements, you've kind of made the comparison about the woke ideology in America as similar to North Korea propaganda. How do you justify that comparison?
Because it's the same ideology that it's woke got it from, right? It's the same very much a Marxist ideology that individuals don't matter. The only thing that matters is the collective. That collectively we need to be equal. And as soon as the individual said my rights matters as much as anybody said, there's like it doesn't matter. And when the woke says, the hate speech or the cancel culture, right? Even the cancel culture, of course, in North Korea, is that if you said the one wrong word, you can be executed. In America, if you said the one wrong thing, you lose your job, your livelihood, your character assassinated.
So obviously that's a real and extreme example of what can absolutely happen in a dictatorship. But if you've been listening carefully, look, you're gonna kill me for this, but all authoritarian dictatorships aren't that bad. So before you call me a Chinese bot or a North Korean spy, remember when Ilhan was telling us her story? All hell broke loose with the civil war, not during Somalia's dictatorship, but after it fell into anarchy. And look, that's just one example, but it's a similar thing with Dr. Sheila's Iran. And there's even more layers to that story. I don't know if you knew, but for decades, Iran's government was ruled under an authoritarian monarchy under the Shah. But I'm sure as a lot of you know, after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, it was replaced under promises of a democratic Islamic government, which soon obviously turned into dictatorships under a supreme leader. And look, it's up to you to decide which dictatorship was better for its citizens, but here's a before and after. So it sounds fucking obvious that, yeah, one dictator and another dictator are gonna have completely different results. But what's not revealed enough is how these dictatorships even came about in the first place. Because as much as some countries like to say we don't like dictatorships, we do. And you'll see, because back in 1953, Iran actually used to have a democratic system with a parliament and a prime minister, and the Shah was more so just like a figurehead. But when the prime minister started moving crazy and started to push for Iranian sovereignty, that was just not going to fly under certain interests. After the prime minister started advocating for the nationalization of Iran's oil, the prime minister was soon arrested. And soon after, the Shah abolished the democratic system that existed and was now reinstated as this centralized dictator. One thing that's also interesting too is that, you're Jewish. What changed specifically for the general public, and then what made it particularly dangerous for you?
I mean, I think everything changed, right? You look at photos before, it was like 70s heaven with like mini skirts and like high fashion, and it was very like European. That's what I could say. It was like the Shah was very tolerant of Jews. The Shah was kind of very accepting of the Jews. So there was a lot of influx of Jewish people into Iran at that time. It's kind of like the golden age. And after the Shah fell, everything changed.
So how the hell did all this happen? Well, if you're not stupid and you probably could have guessed, it was the CIA who orchestrated the coup, and there's plenty more examples like this. Because as much as the US likes to shit on dictatorships, they sure as hell like them because it's a lot easier to manipulate a central power, and especially a country during a crisis. And when one side has called immigration a crisis while the other has called mass deportation a fascist dictatorship move, I wanted to ask some of these political refugees about their thoughts on the immigration issue. Obviously, immigration was a pretty hot topic this year when it came to the election across the board. What is your stance on immigration? And do you think that we should let anyone in?
So that's a really good question to ask someone like me, right? Like, I am immensely grateful for that, right? Like those turn of events for me. And so I want that for everyone around the world, and which is why I advocate for the right to seek asylum to exist. Our immigration systems around the world are broken. They are challenging. But I know that the American people have big hearts. They are as amazing as the ones who like helped my family when we crossed the border into Kenya. We just have to figure out, how do we make our systems work so that the people who do deserve the second chance are able to get that.
Do you believe that the US and other Western countries use Venezuela as sort of like a political tool rather than actually genuinely caring about democracy in the region? Do you feel like US should be doing more? Or
No,
less?
absolutely. U.S. Should be doing more. I have absolutely no doubt about that. And I think this is not just about Venezuela. So if you're in the U.S. and you care about migration, well, you need to care about autocracy, because the source of migration is an autocratic regime. The largest country that is taking migrants to the entire continent is Venezuela. It's 8.5 million people.
People have called Trump a fascist. What do you think about that?
That's literally such a lamest thing to say about somebody. Like, fascist had a meaning back then, right? It means something, but that's the one thing is what leftists does. They dilute the meaning of words. They especially trying to make the words so confusing and doesn't mean anything. That's one thing that when I was in North Korea, words really don't mean much. In America, words meant something. Like racist meant something. Just like that, like being a fascist, like what does that mean? It just means nothing. And I think they need to do better. Like it's just clear that American people don't buy that kind of a literally complete BS.
Congresswoman Omar is an America-hating socialist.
Is Trump a fascist?
I do believe.
Why?
He doesn't believe that laws apply to him. He is the kind of person that wants to blame someone else for the crimes or the corruption and fraud that he partakes in. He doesn't believe in cohesiveness of an open society where people do get to have opinions, are able to criticize their government without retribution, and those are, the essential markings of what a fascist is.
I've seen many people, not just in the US, but also in Europe and in Latin America, just using concepts that are extreme, that don't apply to what is happening. It's important to, at least call the things by what they really are.
Which brings me back to the point, because it's easy to criticize these other countries, but is America any better? Or are we just the best at creating illusions? The US system was theoretically founded to not just let the rich, but the common man, well, except women, Black, or Asian people, to hold power so no single person or group controlled everything. But fast forward to today, and isn't that exactly what happened? We have lobbyists and corporate donors that give funding to influence career politicians who's only incentivized by growing their power in their stock portfolio. Because we have Congress members who theoretically earn around 170 to 220K a year, have stock portfolios around $111 million. I wonder how that can happen, allegedly. So I wanted to confront a current congresswoman about that, because how can we be the world's police when we haven't even cleaned our own room in corruption? Allegedly, of course. Do you think stock trading should be legal or illegal?
Oh, it should be illegal. I don't have stocks, right? I'm like one of the poorest members of Congress. I was an educator when I got here. I had kids, really young.
So you put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, I was a young immigrant trying to survive. My first child was born nearly 5 years after I got here. So I am like an anomaly in this place. But it is interesting to see some of my colleagues, the growth of their portfolio in the time that we've been here. And to me, it can't be the market.
So if it's true, there's hope that no matter how corrupt the system, I like to think that there will always be at least a few that are going to try and do good. But it's clear that the political machine doesn't reward this type of behavior. They don't reward the people who play the game fairly. And with both the right and left's distrust in government reaching an all-time low, I wanted to ask the most important question that I had going into this video. Because do we need some change? Can other systems be the solution? One thing that's interesting, you kind of brought this up earlier, is that especially like even in college students today, there's even talk of people who've never experienced it advocate for things like socialism and communism. I don't think many people are advocating for like dictatorships, but I'm curious on whether you think anything like that could ever work.
No, I don't think it would work. It's just against human nature. Like, it could never work. Like, when people are given stuff for free and you don't have to like work for anything and you're dependent on the government for everything, you've just given up your entire power to somebody else, and also you've given up your will. And not just like will to make decisions for yourself, but like almost like will to achieve. Like, if everything ends up in the same place, and no matter how hard you work or how little you work, you're gonna end up in the same place, why would anyone work? That's the end of research and development.
Do you think socialism, communism, or a dictatorship could ever work?
No, absolutely not. And I think those people who defend, the socialism in Venezuela, that defend the policies of someone like Maduro or before Maduro, Chavez, I think they do without having any understanding of what it means to live under those regimes. I think it's very hypocritical. I think it's very condescending, and I think it's even it creates a great inconsistency. They are defending ways of living that are far away from what they would promote for themselves or their kids.
I'm curious because I think in this election, both sides have said that the other is a threat to democracy, right? How legitimate are the claims of someone who has seen dictatorships, someone who has seen anarchy, that the United States is losing its democracy?
Things don't fall apart at once. Without good people and good systems, you are in danger of obviously having dictatorship and anarchy and having your country fall apart.
Okay, so I'll admit it. I think I could have asked the question a lot better because socialism, communism, and dictatorships are quite different, but history sure as hell shows that they can be linked. Because Lopez saw Venezuela call himself socialist, but become dictatorships in practice, and Yami saw communists promise over and over again a classless society, but became the definition of an authoritarian dictatorship. And I think all this reveals a pattern. So stick with me, but I think it's explained in the most obvious way by Squid Games and why it's resonated with so many people around the world. In a dystopian story where desperate individuals compete in deadly children's games for a cash prize, Squid Games reflects a harsh truth about human nature. When survival and success are on the line, most of us are gonna act just like the contestants we see on screen. Because as much as we like to preach it, human beings aren't equal. Some will work harder, some will work smarter. Some might get lucky, and others would even play dirty to win. And what it reflects is the brutal truth that incentives and self-interest drive our world. While socialism and communism try and ignore it and suppress it, oftentimes this truth of self-interest still comes out when these systems inevitably become dictatorships. Look, capitalism sure as hell isn't perfect, but at least it accounts for this. Because where else can a proclaimed socialist like Hassan Piker be one of the best capitalists? What other system can you preach socialism to a bunch of kids who only lived under a capitalist society, making millions off of a platform owned by one of the most capitalistic companies of all time? Look, I'm not even kidding. That grift alone deserves his multi-million-dollar home. And it's exactly why this is still the land of opportunity and why I love America. Because when people can profit off of dishonesty, as long as there's a market for it, I feel like there's something so honest about that. But with that said, how much longer can things stay like this? If you're American today, you probably hate at least 30 to 40% of the population. The average American is stupid and fat, and anything the other side does is a threat to your way of life or democracy. And we're so blind to our divide and buried in our phones to cope with the fact that we'll probably never own a home that it takes a 26-year-old Ivy League vigilante to allegedly murdered the CEO of the largest health insurance company in the world to finally see across party lines and be like, oh shit, maybe things do need a change. Because look, capitalism works for a reason, but people are now starting to see through the illusion that they've been f***ed with for too much and too long. So if you thought 2024 was crazy, I don't think we've seen nothing yet with 2025. But then again, why the hell should you listen to me? Maybe I'm just grifting your fears so you'll watch until the end. Now shut the f up and give me my capitalist ad dollars. Just kidding, just kidding. Subscribe, and if you want to support me further, join our free weekly newsletter where we give you that one big story that you need to know every single week, but without the bias. But if you don't, then just watch this next video here.